This book shifted my perspective on God, and I've never had a closer relationship with God than I have right now because of this. And there are three ways that this book actually shifted my perspective on God, and I think it'll shift yours too. So, in this book, The Awe of God by John Bevere, I'll bring you the first concept that it brought to me that actually started to shift my perspective, and which is holy fear versus normal fear. The difference is when you have normal fear, it's fear like the fear of snakes, or the fear of airplanes, or even just long words, or even just grass, for instance. And what normal fear does is that basically it pulls you away from the thing that you initially are fearing. So if you're afraid of bugs, like my girlfriend, you'll absolutely never see her even close to anything that has remotely more than four legs. Holy fear, as Bevere explains in this book, has a lot of different things that encompass the word holy fear. So I'm going to do my best to explain it in a really brief way to you right now. Holy fear isn't the same as normal fear in the fact of instead of pushing you away from God, the thing that you're fearing, it actually pulls you closer to Him. And holy fear is not only having reverence towards God, but it's also being in awe of Him. So here's the definition of reverence, because I don't think many people know the definition of reverence, because I didn't even know it when I was reading this book. And so it's from the Complete Study Dictionary. And basically it says this: profound, adoring, awed respect. And aw's definition, actually the original definition from the 1828 Webster's edition, actually says this: fear, dread, inspired by something great and terrific. Now, I know that doesn't sound like it relates to what most Christians talk about, which is how loving God is. And I understand it, because I was honestly pretty confused when I first saw this definition that Bevere actually brought in his book. As I started to read more and more into this book, Bevere actually explains this into more detail with more examples in the Bible and also in real life as well. An example that he brings out is in Isaiah chapter 5. And this is basically, for context, it's a prophet named Isaiah, because, the name of the book. And he basically is telling the country of Israel that, hey, listen, you're doing stuff that is wrong. You're sinning and you're going against God. And God is telling me that He's warning you that this is going to happen if you don't stop and turn back to God. I.e., if you don't do great things, you'll get similar bad results. Then they just ignore Isaiah and the warning that God sent to him to bring to the people of Israel. And then basically what he's just doing is he's just calling them out for what they're doing, just really blatantly, to be honest. And so in the next chapter, he kind of gets transported to heaven for a bit. And so he sees God pretty much face to face. And Isaiah, remember, the prophet, the godly person, he doesn't respond to the presence of God like, how you would think he would. It's like, oh my gosh, he's so great. Wow, my king. Oh my jeez. He's not like that at all. And Bevere actually points this out in his book on page 34, and he writes this: no, he cried out, it's all over. I'm doomed, for I am a sinful man, and I have filthy lips. And there is this clear contrast to how holy God is and how unholy Isaiah was. Remember, this guy is a super godly man. He's literally a freaking prophet. Like, for context, God is speaking solely to him at this time, and he's delivering a message that is so important that it needs to go out to all of the country of Israel, which is basically, God's chosen people at the time. And so he's a really important dude, and there's no reason, like, he's supposed to be godly. That's why God chose him, to be honest. And basically, I can understand what Revere is bringing with the situation. Basically, what he's saying is that God and his presence aren't to be taken lightly. Fearing God means that we respect him for being the literal God of the universe that has so much power to do anything and everything that he wants to do, and yet he still is merciful enough to let us live in this place right here, right now. Now you might be asking, because I honestly asked this question too, Gian, like, why would I want to get closer to God if I fear him? Why would I want to fear him if I can't see a reason why to get closer to him? Because I honestly would be terrified to see if God accepts me or not. Trust me, I get you. And I used to live like that. So here's an example that I kind of want to bring to you that kind of would, help better illustrate Bevere's point that he's making in this book. So whenever we're kids, we do stupid stuff, right? We lie to our parents, we break their stuff, we color on the walls, we do all this different kinds of things to drive our parents crazy. And yet they still love us and they don't beat us to death. Well, the good parents anyways. And let's say you have a good relationship with your parents. You love them and they love you and they trusted you with something. And as the kids that we are, we fumble it. We fumble what they trusted us with. And we've all probably gotten grounded before by our parents or maybe some spankings. And yes, that does suck. But you want to know what really sucks? It's when they give you that look of disappointment. See, they're not mad at you, but you disappointed them. And I know if you're a kid that loves your parents, and if you were a kid that loved your parents, or maybe even right now, that look stings. It literally freaking hurts so much, and it digs right into your heart, man. But why does that even hurt? That's the real question. It's because what we did actually drove a wedge in between our relationship with our parents and them with us, so that we aren't really as close with them as we once were before. Now, they don't hate us, at least the good parents, anyways, but there is some distance in our relationship with them. And that's honestly what sin does to our relationship with God. See, our sin separates us from Him and it creates a wedge between us and God. Now, God isn't disappointed in you because He loves you far more than you could ever imagine, but what we did not please Him. And honestly, it created that wedge between us, and we start to suffer and receive sadness and pain because we're separate from God. Holy fear is basically the reverence and awe that keeps us in right standing with God because we honestly fear being separate from Him, like we would our parents. And so, how the concept of holy fear really shifted my perspective on God was really that it made me notice that I wasn't really taking my relationship with God seriously, not completely anyways. So before I get into the next concept that changed, my perspective on this, I want to say this first. This isn't a Christian podcast. This is just a pod run by a person who is a follower of Jesus, and I believe in improving yourself daily and in self-development and getting better than who you were yesterday. And a main part of that development is my faith, and it's an integral part of that journey for me. Now, I don't expect you to be Christian. I don't expect you to believe what I believe anyways. This material is for everybody pretty much. This is just something major that's happened to me in my own faith journey, and I just want to share this with anybody who it might help, to be honest. So after I started to understand more and more about what the fear of God is, it kind of just brought even more questions to my head because I just needed to be more clarified on what the heck it actually was. And one of the main questions that actually stuck out to me was, what does fearing God even look like? Like, I get giving God reverence, like in church and in worship and stuff like that. But the main thing that was just boggling my head, I was just like, how do we do this in a more practical sense, like in a day-to-day kind of way? And I imagine that I would just always be fearful of staying in God's presence and leaving His grace and stuff, and like constantly in a perpetual state of fear. And honestly, I was like that at some point. But then I had to ask myself how then I would accept God's grace and His mercy that God gives me through Jesus Christ. And so then Bevere explains this kind of perfectly in the way that I can understand it anyways. And it basically just is this: just obedience to God. If you fear God, you'll obey Him. And it's about understanding that He is the literal God of the whole universe that has all the power, that is far greater than you could ever even imagine, yet incredibly loving to the fact that He always thinks of you. He thinks of you more times than there are grains of sand on this planet, meaning He pays so much attention to you every single second of every single day. Holy fear leads you to choose to honor Him and prioritize His desires over our own. And ultimately, it's honestly for your own benefit. Because avoiding sin isn't just we not having fun or to limit ourselves, for instance. It's actually to protect us from the consequences that come from those decisions and actions. For instance, like getting drunk at parties and drinking and having fun and whatever. Sure, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. However, is it still fun when you get back home and you still have to deal with your fears and anxieties and insecurities while that hangover is still settling in? Watching porn every single night or every single week feels great until you start to feel the shame and guilt 5 seconds after you're done, and then the loneliness, the tiredness, the lack of motivation and lack of purpose in your life starts settling in after that. Trust me, I know how that feels, and it's not worth it. When you obey God's will for your life, you're giving Him the awe, respect, and authority He deserves in your life. And it's not that complicated, but it's not that easy either. Especially in the culture right now where, the fear of God is literally pretty much nowhere, and everyone seems to think that they know everything and they know exactly what they need for themselves and the best for themselves. And even though they may be completely wrong, people are still too afraid to actually call them out on it in a respectful way, or else they'll maybe canceled or whatever. And so I like to kind of think about it like this way whenever I have a really tough time obeying God. When I know He has something for me to do, but I have a tough time actually doing it. I recognize that I'm a human. on this pretty big planet and in this gigantic universe. And the God of this humongous universe is telling me what he says is best for my life. And so, is it actually smart and wise to think that I know more than the literal God of the universe who knows infinitely more than I do? Probably not. So, to say that I'm right and God is wrong when he's the one who created the universe in all of its qualities and know everything about those qualities, and I'm just the one here living in it, would seem pretty illogical to me, anyways. Especially when the God of the universe made a way for me to get redeemed from all the wrongdoings that I've done in my life and actually is looking out for my best interest because I'm his son. And I just like to think of it this way because it helps my mind understand the reality of this because God exists. And I know I only used to believe that God exists, but my actions and my decisions never really reflected that in my daily life. And so actually thinking in this kind of more logical way really started to help me obey God a whole lot more. And this leads me to the next concept that Bevere actually goes into that honestly helped me realize this. And I've actually already shared this in the beginning of this episode. And it's because the more I fear God, the closer I get to him. Because holy fear doesn't push me away from God. Rather, it makes me understand how much respect and reverence God deserves from me. And because I recognize that respect and awe that he deserves and the authority he has, then I'll obey. Because what he says to do is ultimately so much better than what I think I should do. And I'm just a human, and he's honestly the God of the universe. And the interesting thing is, when you do what someone asks or you just do something for them, you honestly get a lot more closer with them. When you do something that someone asks you to do for them, or you just do something for them like in advance or anything like that, you're basically forming and creating a better representation of yourself inside of their minds so that they can trust you more, which then invites them to be closer with you. For instance, for many of you watching this, probably new viewers or returning viewers, hello. I may just be Gian to you at first. I'm just a guy named Gian who owns this podcast, or even for anyone else out there. Then let's say you need help with something. You contact me, or I find out you need help with something, or I invite you to dinner or whatever like that, and you're probably going through a tough time, and I help you with that situation. Now, after that whole interaction happens, I become more than just Gian to you. I become, oh, that's Gian. He really helped me in a really tough situation. Oh, that's Gian. Like, he invited me to dinner, and he was so very generous with his time, and it was honestly a really great conversation. And see, too many of us as followers of Christ, while Christ may know us and our names, I don't think he can honestly say a lot of extra things to say that shows that he actually trusts us. And so in page 215, actually, Bevere actually makes this point that God in the Old Testament really only had two prime examples of people that he said that he trusted and that were friends with him, which was Abraham and Moses. Now, even while there were so many great people of God in the Old Testament and throughout the Bible, these two are basically the most recognizable to be friends and trusted by God. And now Jesus had kind of a similar criteria for friendships with other people and trust with them, as Bevere cites John chapter 2, verses 23 to 24. And it basically says this: because of the miraculous signs Jesus did in Jerusalem at the Passover celebration, many began to trust him. But Jesus didn't trust them because he knew all about people. While Jesus was showing that he could be trusted by all people by the miracles and signs that he did to show them that the love of God was out for them, he didn't really reciprocate that trust back to them. Like we all know, sure, people can trust you because you've proven yourself to be a trustworthy person. However, that doesn't really mean that the people who trust you, you still see them as reliable, consistent, and loyal to you because they haven't even shown it. Because at the time, Jesus had many disciples, much more than just the 12. And a lot of them were actually just following him in secret, and honestly, a lot of times when it only benefited them, i.e., Judas, the disciple, the one who betrayed Jesus. Haha. Then Bevere kind of points this out. How do you meet the criteria of having a friendship with Jesus and God? Just basically do what Abraham and Moses did: obey whatever God tells you to do. And I kind of want to bring this real world example to really kind of show this. So let's say you're a boss of a company, right? And you have two employees. You tell them both to do something. And let's say it's to make 15 calls to clients before the end of the day. And so at the end of the day, you check in with those two employees. And the first employee actually makes those 15 calls before the end of the day, and you're like, oh, that's pretty good. So then you check in with the second employee, and he was only able to get 10 calls done that day. And then he gives you an excuse saying that it was just so difficult for him to do. So that's why he was only able to get to 10. So I want to ask you, so answer this in the comments. Who would you actually trust more? Employee 1 or employee 2? Just write down 1 or 2 in the comments. Now, personally, I'd honestly trust employee number 1 because, he got the job done, even though it probably was still hard, like for employee number 2 for him. But he still managed to get the job done in the time that we needed him to. But this doesn't mean I'm going to fire employee number 2, but I'm just probably going to give them a lot less responsibility because, they haven't shown me that I can trust them with more things on their plate. Now, with employee 1, I'll actually start to trust him more, like everyone else would. Maybe I'll give him more calls to do. Maybe I'll have even more responsibilities to do. Or maybe when he asks for help to be more effective in phone calls, I'll be more eager to help him because I know he'll actually act out on that advice. And maybe he'll become a manager of that section of my company later down the road. And probably I would trust him with more inside info of what our business is going to do and probably get his feedback on some stuff because I know he's a person that commits to do the things that is asked of him. And he's shown me that I'm able to trust him with whatever I ask him to do. Now, here's the big question. Why would God trust you if you continue to say no to do what he asks or even just do what he asks completely? Because I know I wouldn't, and I know many of you wouldn't. You wouldn't trust anyone who just didn't do what you asked them to do or even just didn't do it completely. So why do we expect God to do that with us? And see, with trust comes closeness in every single relationship, including God relationship with us. And when you are close with God, you have more peace. You have more clarity on where you're going in life, more love to give to others, and you're actually growing in wisdom and maturity every single day that you're closer to him because he has all of those qualities. And when you're closer to a person who has those qualities, just like any relationship, you start to look more like them. Now, am I saying that I obey God every single time that he tells me to do something? No, no, I don't, honestly, because I'm human and I mess up and I suck many, many times. But is that an excuse to mess up? Absolutely not. Because I honestly use it as a reason to continue getting up when I do fall and make a mistake because my heart is honestly after what God wants for me and what God wants for the rest of humanity. And it's after him more than anything else that I want in life. And this book has honestly helped me see the importance of obedience and honestly to take my relationship with God so much more seriously. And now this book goes so much more in depth into all of these things and a lot of extra things too. And honestly, it's a really interesting and fun read, to be honest, because it's super easy to read. Don't get me wrong. It's basically all the chapters are split up into daily readings. And so all of the chapters are pretty much no more than just 6 pages long. John Bevere has honestly done such an amazing job writing this book and praying about it. And honestly, it's blessed me tremendously. And I recommend it to all of you who are interested in growing your relationship with God and really getting deeper into that relationship with him. The link will be in the description if you want to go get it. And I highly recommend you do. And I hope this honestly added some value to you. And as always, start growing. Start right now, and God bless you guys.